All right, so biceps brachii. Some of this should definitely be reviewed, but let's make sure we're clear on it. Biceps brachii is the superficial muscle of the upper arm, right? And the biceps, the prefix bi, what does that mean? Two, right? And the two in this case refers to heads, which is often the case in muscles. The bi and the tri often refers to when it splits into multiple heads. The brachii, what does that refer to? Arm, upper arm. Awesome, awesome. All right, so let's start with O, the I, the A. So there's two heads, so we got to talk about short head, long head. The origin of the short head is going to originate at the coracoid process, right? The crow's beak sticks out front. What else originates there? Pec minor actually inserts there, trick question. Yeah, inserts there, pec minor, excellent. And then the long head originates on the supraglenoid tubercle of the scapula, which you may recall from when we studied the scapula. It is not palpable because it's crazy deep, but way up in here is the supraglenoid tubercle. And so this head actually goes up through the on the humerus. Remember, there's between the greater tubercle and the lesser tubercle, this intertubercular groove. That tendon goes up through there and then up through the joint capsule to go to that supraglenoid tubercle. So that actual origin itself there on the long head is not palpable, but we can palpate, anywhere from the tendon down. The tendon, you're not really going to release it massaging in that tendon itself. So I would advise against it. The insertion is a tuberosity of the radius and aponeurosis of the biceps brachii. And so we kind of split off here. There's a little bicipital aponeurosis here. And then on this diagram, we can see where that tuberosity of the radius is. Now, we didn't really study the lower arm yet, but on the proximal part of the radius, there's a little bump sticks out. It's too deep to palpate, but we can palpate more superficially where these tendons go. You can do that on yourself right now. It's pretty easy to track biceps brachii. If you flex your arm and supinate your arm, you can feel your biceps brachii get, hard. And you can feel, the big bulk of it on the superficial part of the upper arm. And then if you, squeeze your fingers down as it gets lower, you can feel it, the head's kind of coming together. And then you can feel it become tendinous and cross over. Very thick tendon, very palpable. If you feel that big, thick tendon that crosses over the front of the elbow, and then you can feel it kind of flatten out from there. Can you all feel a giant big tendon on the front of your elbow? Yeah, you're on it. Now, everybody knows about their biceps, right? And does different weight training to strengthen it. But do keep in mind that there's actually a muscle deep to it that's actually very powerful. So you always want to work the muscle deep to it as well. Brachialis, which, like many of the deeper muscles, is hard to isolate if you try to go through the superficial muscle. But if you feel the edges of biceps brachii, which are very easy to grab, on either side of it, especially on the distal aspect, you can get to that deeper muscle. Just something to keep in mind, if somebody's tight up here, to make sure to work the deeper and superficial muscle. Questions so far? Awesome question. So aponeurosis is where tendon is more broad or flattens out. And this is kind of a smaller aponeurosis. The bigger aponeurosis is like that thoracolumbar one that takes up a huge part of your low back. Yeah. So it's just the tendon has flattened out a bit. Where the tendon becomes more like a Band-Aid than a rope or a string. All right, so our action's pretty straightforward here. We're crossing two joints, right? So the muscle can act on any of the joints that it crosses. So we can act on oftentimes one at a time or both at the same time. So we're crossing the elbow and the shoulder. How do you think it's possible for a muscle to act on one of the joints it crosses, but not the other at the same time? So if a muscle crosses the elbow and the shoulder, sometimes it can act on both at the same times or just one or the other. How do you think it acts on just one or the other versus both at the same time? What do you think determines that? Like how? Tell me more.
This has got two heads.
Yeah.
So it depends where it would be to determine that movement.
Okay.
Not making it that clear, but
yeah, I think I'm following you. That's some good thinking. Yep. Mm-hmm.
But they cross though, right? Like in the kneecap.
Yeah. So if you were able to fire part of the fibers and not all of them, that could be true. But in this muscle, you're kind of just firing your fibers for the biceps, not choosing which ones. Mm-hmm. Any other ideas?
The only thing I can think of is there's other muscles in the shoulder that stabilize, which means that it locks that. Is that what you mean?
100%. Yep. So I just wanted to call that out because a lot of times.
That's like a long walk.
we're still trailing behind you.
Yeah, no, exactly, 100%. So other muscles can also contract and they can stabilize so certain movements don't happen and then the other movements can. And I just wanted you to start thinking about that because there's a lot of muscles with a lot of actions, like we were looking at pec major, right? And you can use your pec major a lot and you're not always doing all the actions, right? So that's what's happening is you have other things stabilizing it, but you just have fibers contracting or relaxing. It's not like the muscle is saying like, oh, okay, now we're going to do this motion, but not this motion. Does that make a little bit of sense for
I was trying to like later on like this to stabilize it.
Yeah. So let's imagine that. So this biceps brachii crosses the shoulder anteriorly. So it can, when it shortens, it flexes the shoulder. But we could also fire this biceps brachii and only have the elbow flexion happen. So what could happen in that case is extenders of the shoulder are holding my shoulder back. And so that I can just flex my elbow without flexing my shoulder.
So think about doing a bicep curl.
Well, the bulk of them come over and short head.
Right, but is this joint moving? Or why not?
Because you're super sensitive.
What does that mean? Instead of moving.
That's correct.
What is the stabilization?
Would you want to?
And if it's just a thought experiment,
I'm trying
Is that
I'm trying to
this cheek, right?
yeah.
I think I'm just talking about semantics of stabilizing.
Here's two more pieces that may help. One is that, like, just as a thought experiment, it might be a little abstract and overwhelming. So what I would recommend is like picking up something heavy enough that you can actually feel your muscles working, and then do the action, pick up something really heavy, stack your books, and feel that your other muscles are acting so that, I'm shortening my biceps to make this happen, but I can feel muscles in my shoulder acting when I do this. If you pick up something light, you won't notice it, but pick up something heavy and see how your other muscles are resisting. Yeah. So then another piece of the puzzle that just
like controlling what it's doing.
100%, 100%. Yep. And you could think about like dancing and sports and all kind of elegant movements we do, right? That we often have to stop certain movements from happening so that we can have other movements happen. And you could just start thinking about it, right? It might not all click all at the same time.
I'm thinking like you dorsal, and so the proximal and that joint will be stabilized in the movement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Because sometimes you'll actually move both sides, right? And other times you'll just move one side, not the other. Yeah.
So the stabilization, I just tell the muscle simply like stopping in place so that one muscle isn't being used and another one can be used.
Yep, exactly. And good job. There's also like, I don't want to get you overwhelmed with like the names of the different types of contractions yet, but the idea of them may help it make sense, is that muscles only do their work by shortening. You can shorten them enough that they actually move the joint. You can shorten them enough that they are just resisting weight against gravity. So I'm clearly firing my biceps brachii to hold this book in this position, but there's no movement. So I'm just firing enough to hold this in space. Or you can contract them, they're still firing, but not strong enough to resist. And so I'm now still contracting because it's controlled. If I was not contracting, I would drop this to the ground. Now, that might have made it even more complicated.
Yeah.
We're going to come back to it. But if you start to think about that, that's how the stabilizers are working too. That sometimes they're contracting, but only enough to resist movements, right? Not so much that they're like actually pulling something back. Yep.
So then it would be like wires on the bridge.
Yeah, totally.
The pillars themselves don't go like this, but simply just stabilize.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Keep on falling over.
Yep. And
Yeah,
speaking,
the bridge by West Seattle. So
oh yeah.
I don't know.
And speaking of those two like analogies, the one Gio was saying reminds me another way you can like feel it in action that might help you to feel it instead of just think about it is any kind of the balancing activities you do at a gym. If you were to like stand on a ball or any of the things that can kind of like roll or any sport where you're balancing it, you can feel that you got little tweaks in all your muscles to keep things upright. So it's like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was a really fantastic job, everybody. Whether you made it all the way or not, you made it somewhere. It's not the first time we will take a look at that. But I wanted you to start thinking about it. All right, cool. So biceps brachii is pretty straightforward. We can flex the elbow, right? If we shorten, we can supinate the forearm. So radial ulnar joints, hand goes up, holds the sup, and we can flex the shoulder. So fun little thing, right? If you want to isolate this muscle in the gym or whatever, even though a lot of folks are doing more kind of functional movements now, but like the muscle below it only crosses one joint and it doesn't also supinate. So it's like those little differences where you can like isolate whether you're going to like just flex or flex and supinate as you're, isolating different muscles. So just a little food for thought. Questions, comments? Yeah, I hear you. I'm going to keep talking anyway.